Okay, it is now recording. So we're going to start off, if we can go to the next slide, Patrick, with just a little how to submit questions. So you have this link in the Zoom chat. You can type in a question. You can ask it anonymously if you want by clicking this checkbox. And if everyone actually goes to this link, whether you have a question or not, if you go to the next slide, Patrick, you'll be able to see all the questions that have been asked by everyone. And if this is a question that you also had, you should upvote it. If you don't think the question is good, you should downvote it. So with that, I think we are going to get to the question portion, and let's kick off with a couple of questions that we did already provide to Professor Heinke and Sacchi, just to kick everything off. Everything else will be questions from you. So let's start with Professor Heinke. This is about the NSERC announced grant funding extensions for grad students. So the question is, what do graduate students have to do in terms of talking to the supervisor, in terms of providing documentation to receive this funding, and what are the options for students who are not eligible for this NSERC funding?
So this is a question for me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not a funding that's given directly to students. It's given to PIs of NSERC grants, and the exact details are a little bit fuzzy at the moment. NSERC has not made this really easy to answer, and so we're going to be hopefully getting more clarity from them, at least at the time that they're actually offering the funding. So what I have asked grad students to do immediately is to just talk to their supervisor. Documentation that's up to you and your supervisor to kind of figure out what needs to be documented. Basically, what needs to happen is that the supervisor has to tell NSERC whether or not they have had funding delays, and we don't know exactly yet what kind of options NSERC will give them. Does NSERC just say, yes or no, your students have got delays? If some of your students have been delayed, then we'll give you this chunk like this into your account. Or is it more nuanced? Do they say how many students or which parts? This isn't clear. It's also not entirely clear whether it matters if the student was funded by NSERC or not. That's not clear at the moment. I mean, if I were running this, I would probably, I'm not the one designing this from NSERC, but if I were, I would probably say, do you have students who are delayed? And if so, and you have an NSERC grant, which is funding students, not necessarily the same students, then we can give you some money in your NSERC grant to fund students for extensions. Because that would seem to be the most logical thing, rather than trying to make sure that every grant does the same thing, and who knows how many different kind of grants people have. Just make sure that NSERC money goes to fund students who need it. And because people move people around on grants all the time. Somebody's on NSERC one month, and then they're on Canadian Space Agency or CIHR or whatever, right? So I would my assumption would be that, but I can't actually guarantee that. NSERC hasn't made that information easily available yet. So from my perspective, what I want is every student who needs a funding extension because of delays to their research due to COVID, whether that be locked out of the lab or something else, I would like any student who has these kind of delays to let their supervisor know and ask for this. And if the supervisor can get the money from NSERC, great. If the supervisor doesn't have enough money from NSERC to handle all the students who are needing that, then they can talk to me and look at their other grant thing and see if they can provide the other funding extensions. I know there are some professors who have been able to provide additional funding, people past their guaranteed funding before this whole situation, and that this happens some of the times. Maybe somebody could email Michael and tell him to, or chat him and tell him to click the little button next to the mute button there, so he can, that little one that gives him the option to go into phone, to have a phone connection to Zoom. Thanks. Let's see. So have I got this? Yeah. And basically, so at the end, just to say, look, talk to your supervisor. We'll try to find a method that works with the supervisor, and if we're not coming to satisfaction, then come and talk to me.
Okay, thank you. So I think we'll go on to the question for Professor Sacchi, which is, with all the changes to TAing in the upcoming semester, what is being done to ensure that graduate students have proper training for their virtual teaching duties? So, Professor Sacchi.
You're muted right now, Mauricio.
So we're going to offer again the boot camp, like every year, and that boot camp will have to be, realigned to the way we're going to be teaching in the fall. I think that is Stephen Lane, and I think that Kyle also gets involved. And there is a big difference also between TAs doing first year courses that they have to, for sure, take the boot camp and discuss with Al Meldrum, the director of UGL, and Kyle, which is the coordinator of UGL, and also with Stephen Lane, how we're going to be dealing with the TA's duties for the labs. And then you have people who are going to be doing TAs of, let's say, a 300 level course or a 400 level course. And in that case, I think that it's going to be more a conversation with the professor who is teaching, right? You are a TA for the geophysics field school, you have to teach with the person who is doing the field school, or you're a TA in some 400 level physics course, you will have to get in touch with the professor too, to see how he or she wants to deal with working online, The thing that most worries me, and maybe this is where we can get some feedback from you, is that if there is a need, for instance, of having a consultation with students where, in the past, you grab a whiteboard or a blackboard and you start to show how to solve a problem. Now you are not going to have that option, but you could use a tablet. I don't want the TAs to go and buy a tablet, so one possibility, if is needed, is the department buying several tablets that can be, borrowed by TAs who need to do tutorials or things like that. Some tablets are very expensive, like the the Apple ones, the iPads. But I think there are others that are only a couple of $100 that they work anyway. So getting some feedback about that might help us to order, 5, 6 of them, 10, I don't know, that they could be borrowed if it's needed.
Okay, thank you. Could I, just to summarize, so there's going to be the TA boot camp happening, and for upper year courses, you should probably talk to the person teaching the course.
Yeah, I think so, because if it is a small course, with 15, 20 students, and your duties are to grade, right, or to assist in computer programs, there is no real, what I mean. It's up to the professor, right, to decide how this can be done, right? I mean, I'm thinking, for instance, I don't think that they will have a TA this time because I don't have students, enough students. I don't have a large course. I'm teaching a 400 level course. But if I were having one, for instance, I will be more inclined to have a TA working on computing programs online. So I will have to deal with installation of Jupyter and all these kind of things that are particularly important for my course, right? But there might be other people who have other things in mind.
Okay, and how would you like feedback? Like students just emailing you?
Yeah, I think that when it comes for the first year and second year courses, large courses where the TA has to be in a lab, right? In the past has to be in the lab. I think that the best thing is to directly talk to Al Meldrum, who is the director of the undergrad laboratories, right? Because this is a major enterprise. Yeah, I have hundreds of students, several sessions, going on. and he will probably liaison with Kyle, right? I mean, if it has to do with the normal courses that the TH duties are doing tutorials or grading. I think that first talk to the professor, and if there is a problem, you can talk with me or Roger if it's an undergrad course, or directly to Craig if it's a grad course. If you want, And for feedback, is the same. Yeah, if there are things pertaining the grad program, Craig, Heinke, and myself, and are things related to the undergrad program, Roger and me. And if it's something that has to do with access to space, because you are all working at home, well, in that case, the first conversation has to go with your supervisor, right? You cannot stay at home, you want to go to the office. And that conversation is going to be then move, we're going to include in that conversation probably Gregory Sivakov, who is the Associate Chair for Research, and myself and Tara, and see what we can do.
That sounds good. Okay, so I think for the next question, I think we'll go to one of the Google form questions. So Patrick, could you go to the next slide? So yeah, this is for either of you, Mauricio or Craig. It's mostly about guests at the workplace and the safety around it. I'm not going to try and read everything here, but these are two separate questions, but they're addressing kind of the same issue about are people allowed to bring guests? If they aren't, what way is there to report this, and what are the safety protocols in place to make sure everyone who's using CSIS is safe?
So if a person wants to bring a guest, if he's a PI, a professor, right, has a guest, someone from a funding agency or the province or a collaborator that must see the lab, what usually happens is that the person contacts us and says, can we bring a guest? And when that happened, my answer was yes, but you have to read all the regulations that we have in our website, about COVID. There is a long document that you probably have seen about what to do and what not to do, right? Using masks, etc. The researcher has to acknowledge that all the protocols are going to be followed. And in my cases, the only times that we have agreed that happened was for 1 day or half a day visit of people going into a certain lab, right, to check something. If it's a long-term visit, I haven't had that case, but I don't think that we shouldn't have long-term visitors right now, okay? And if this is a case of a long-term visitor, a person who is working, and without us knowing, we should know, because that person will have to take a course, we have to sign up some paper, we have to go through the process that all the researchers that were allowed to go back to their labs, they have to go through. So again, there is a difference between a person who is visiting for a long period of time of a person who goes for half afternoon to check how things are going because he's from a funding agency or something like that.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that the important thing, the contact tracing will only work if every person who goes into CSIS at any time puts that information in. And if we have somebody who gets ill and goes through CSIS, we need to know everybody who's passing through so that we don't spread it around. And so that's crucial that everybody who goes in checks in. Whether they're allowed to do it, one can futz with that a little bit more. It's pretty open for us if we've signed a little document to say we understand the risks to go in for a one-time use of something in CSIS, but it's crucial that we have that tracing to know who's gone in.
And going back to the question 1A, right? My experience was with PIs asking, can I bring someone in? if it's a researcher that is not the PI, it's a postdoc or of a PhD student or a master student, bringing a friend or a guest, no, that shouldn't be happening, okay? I mean,
Yeah,
right, because that put all of us under certain kind of risk. So there's a researcher, okay? I don't know who is a researcher, what kind of researcher, but you know, a postdoc or a PhD student has a friend who wants to visit, well, no, shouldn't be happening.
I think the second part of that question is there a mechanism to report any kind of people who may not be following guidelines right now?
Well, what I mean, you send an email to me or to Greg Sivakov, and we will treat this with strict confidentiality, right? I mean, you know, and talk to the PI for sure, right? I mean, and then the PI, you know, and I mean, sometimes people make mistakes, right? I mean, I don't think that these things are done, you know, because there is some malice, right? It's just that they might not have read all the regulations that we have in the intranet, right?
Okay, sounds good. Patrick, maybe we'll get a question from the Q&A from the Google Slides. Could you pull one up? So the question is, will graduate students get TA, RA, E contracts for the fall semester?
I think the answer here is yes, unless
Yes.
you're somebody who has accepted but is not able to get to Canada yet because of various different delays, and you don't have your social insurance number and you don't have your Canadian bank account, then we can't actually give you a TA or RA for the fall. But if you are a returning grad student, you've been here for more than a year, and or you have managed to arrive here, get your SI and all that, then yeah, we're doing the TA, RA, E contracts.
Sounds good.
Yeah, they're happening right now, right? The midsummer contracts in my group, people who are leaving or coming, they are all done electronically for RAs. So, you know, Kaylee has been extremely fast in turning this around and asking for 2 PIs for signatures. If there is a delay, it's probably the PI who is not returning the signed contract electronically fast enough. Or in the past, we had, which is not a problem anymore, students not checking their mailboxes. Okay, but now, we don't have to go and check our mailboxes. So it's going to be much easier, I think.
Okay, sounds good. Patrick, maybe we'll try and get the other TA duties question there from the Google Slides. So yeah, this question says, if one starts a fall semester remotely, will it be possible to get TA duties and not get paid? And maybe this is referring to international students who aren't able to get
well, I'll just consider all the different possibilities. So let's say that you are a student who's already been, either you're already been here for some time or you're starting, but you're from Canada somewhere, you have your SIN, you have a Canadian bank account, but you're going to be working from Toronto or something. Fine, you can do your TA, you may be able to do your TA duties there, and then you will get paid, full stop. But if you are stuck in Egypt or wherever, and you're not able to get to Canada, and you don't have your SIN yet, and you don't have your Canadian bank account, then you won't be getting TA duties. Unfortunately, we can't do that remotely at this time. So you won't have to do work, and you won't get paid. So we will, as I mentioned in an email, we can, your supervisors, provided they have the grants available to do this, can pay tuition to allow you to start classes remotely in that situation. So that's the one thing that you can do, even if you can't get to Canada and do the rest of it.
Okay. Patrick, maybe we'll go to one of the Google form questions. So the second question in the Google form.
Sorry, slight technical difficulties.
Okay, yeah.
In the Google form?
Yeah, so it's just as a slide.
Yes.
Perfect. Question number 2. Yeah, so this is just about graduate student offices, asking about the chance of going back to working in the offices in the fall semester.
Right. So we're not at the point where we have crushed the virus down to nothing. And so looking forward, it seems to me rather unlikely that we would be capable of bringing all the grad students back anytime in the fall semester. And I would not either assume that everything is going to be peachy at the beginning of winter semester either. You know, if we're lucky, we might have the vaccine starting to be distributed in January. But you know, I would not assume that this won't continue on into winter as well. Yeah, so because of the fact that unfortunately, you know, our grad student offices are kind of tight, so we can't really have everybody working in the office while we have the virus causing this problem. And so that means that unfortunately we're going to have to be quite limited in which students are able to come in. And so this is part of why we want to have this careful process, because there's some students who desperately need to be in there for one reason or another in order to do something or other. And we need to make sure that we basically have one student per office or less during the time when this virus is a problem. So that's why we go through this careful process of trying to have people apply for exemption to be able to work in the office in the time and then fill out the contact tracing.
And so if a student wanted to get back into an office, is it possible for them to work in an office that's not theirs if they really do want an office to work in?
That you'd have to, well, we would handle that case by case. So if it comes that there are two students who each desperately need to work in an office and they're both in the same office and they can't both be there, would it be possible to have one of them maybe working sometime in another office? I'll say that depends, and say when that situation arises, I will try to deal with it. It is obviously complicated.
Okay. Maybe let's go to another Google form question, Patrick. So next slide. Okay, so this is about the GRAF. So whether this is going to affect current grad student fellowships, and whether students can request to increase their hours, and presumably this is about TA hours. Can students ask for more hours in the fall semester and winter semester?
So for A, the answer is basically no. We are continuing grad student support at the appropriate standard level. There's a small change, a small increase each year in what the funding rates are, the steps, and so we're going about that as normal. Will TA GRAF hours proceed as planned? Yes, that is the plan. Can students request to increase their hours? I mean, you can always ask for anything, but usually we have a limit on what students are allowed to do in terms of TA duties per term and so on. There are certain circumstances in which you can get a little bit more money. Like if you get one of the small exterior fellowships, that gets you a little bit more money and such. But you know, I mean, we have a lot of people trying to get the TA hours, and so giving extra hours who already have a standard TA thing would be quite rare.
If I can just ask a question on top of that, is there going to be more hours or like in total more TA hours, less TA hours this fall, or is it just normal?
That's actually a good question, and it's difficult to figure out because we're kind of changing the way that TAs are doing their work, right? We need less TAs for actual contact hours in labs. We don't have those, but we need more TAs to help develop things beforehand and such. So TAs will kind of be restructured a little bit. You might end up doing more work at the beginning of the term than usual and less in the middle or something. And do we know exactly how much TA? No, we're still working on that because profs are still asking, oh, I need a TA for this thing, which they hadn't had before. People are asking, this is for winter term, but I'm anticipating I'll probably want to have a TA to be present during my lectures to handle chat and running the Zoom session and so on for a large class. These are things that we haven't had before, so it'll move things around. And so it's difficult to say.
Okay, thank you. Patrick, let's go to a Q&A slides question. Yeah, so this might be an easy one. Will the winter semester be online?
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't know.
I would not count on it being in person.
Okay, Patrick, another slide question. So this might be a more general question, but is it possible to take a one-year break between the 2 years of a master's degree?
So there are different kinds of leave that one can request. And so there's, you may be familiar, there's, parental leave, there's a leave, I forget the word for it, where you go and you work for a business and so on like that. And there's just a general leave where you just say, I just want to take a break. I don't have to specify the reason, right? And then you're not doing any TAing or RAing, and you're not taking any class, you're just taking a break. So it is possible to request those. Talk to myself or Kaylee if you want to look into that.
All right, Patrick, let's get another slides question. Okay, so this might be a little bit more technical question, but there is apparently a law in Alberta saying that schools need to require access to a computer and internet. Is this true? And will this pose a problem for instruction?
I don't know always. What do you know, Craig?
This is a complicated legal kind of thing, and so people are looking into this. Roger, I know, Roger Moore has been looking into this with some depth. So the trick is, of course, that at the moment it is, I mean, some of these things were designed, long before anything like the current circumstances were thought of. So at the moment, of course, we cannot actually deliver any remote instruction to a person who doesn't have a computer and internet. So obviously, that's just not going to work. And my thinking at the moment, what the standard workaround we have is we say, look, we are currently incapable of delivering that instruction face-to-face, and so that just can't happen. And so if you don't have computer and internet and aren't willing to gain access to it, then we will be happy to have you come back next year and get instruction then, right? I mean, so my understanding is that there are a lot of things where we have a duty to accommodate insofar as we can do it as it were possible to do it. And right now it's impossible for us to get 16 students into a small class and talk for an hour, right? So therefore that is not happening.
All right, maybe one more question from the slides, Patrick. Okay, will the online courses live streaming be live streamed or recorded classes? For international students who are not in Canada, the time lag might be an issue.
I'd like to just talk about this a little bit, if I may. So I think there's going to be, in many cases, a mix of, so many professors will do some recorded information and some live kind of stuff. Some may choose to do it all live, but regardless, if there's live stuff, that will generally be recorded at the time, and then people who are remote, they will be able to watch it later. So that regardless, it is a part of our duty to accommodate. We have to accommodate people who are remote, and so you should be able to gain access to the information one way or another.
Yeah, if I may add also that it also depends on, first year courses is an issue. Second year courses probably is an issue too. But then when you are moving into the career, third, 4th year astro, geo, or physics courses with 20, 25 students, I think there is a conversation between the professor and the students, right? The first week of class, I was planning to ask, to the students, are you going to be here? Do you have a problem with access? And then based on that, you can decide how to organize your classes. I don't expect too many international students, not in Canada, with the ones who are taking 400 level courses or even grad students, except for the grad students who have accepted for September, and they might not be able to get the papers on time.
I'll just reiterate one last thing to say, if you are having technical problems in a class, please do talk to your professor, and they will make an effort to try to figure out a way to work it out.
All right, thank you. Patrick, let's go to a Google form question. Okay, so this is about courses and whether with the next semester being online, we should expect extra pressure from professors for courses. You can interpret that how you may, I guess.
Should TAs or students? Sorry.
I think this is about doing work. So the courses that graduate students are taking for the next semester. Maybe a way to interpret that is, are the expectations a little lower because everything's a little bit new? And so there are going to be a little less assignments. Are there any top-down instructions or professors about how to structure their courses?
No, I imagine that is going to be, you know, the work, I still understand. Are we talking about the workload for TAs or for students? The workload for TAs is going to be probably the same, because it's you know, it's 12 hours or 6 hours, you know, and there is always a possibility that if the TA feels overwhelmed, you know, talking to the professor, look, you know, this is taking more than 12 hours. And for a student taking the courses, it's hard to say, because I think that the courses are going to be taught in different styles, right? Some professors are going to put more weight on assignments, other on quizzes. You know, there is also students who probably learn, you know, the stuff by themselves, and they like to download the notes, and where are some students who prefer to listen to the prof. So, you know, I don't know if there will be extra pressure on the students or not, okay? For some students, it might be easier to work online than for others, you know?
Okay, thank you. One note I just want to make for all the people listening, I do see there are some new questions that have been submitted to the Google form since we started this session. If you can actually resubmit those questions into the Google Slides Q&A, I think that would make it easier for us to display those questions. So Patrick, maybe let's go to the next Google form question, and then we'll go back to the slides after. Yeah. So this is about the blue and pink sheet meetings, which are the supervisor/committee meetings. So how and when should they take place, I guess?
So those should happen annually, unless you have some particular reason why, like say you need to have an extension, you need to have it approved, then you can ask to have one more often than that. But normally that should happen once per year. Usually it happens in the summer, but if it happens in September, that's no big deal.
Okay, thank you. Patrick, let's go to a Google Slides question. Okay. So this question is about starting in winter 2021. Will there be any complications? And I think this is a very general question about funding, TA duties, awards, everything, if they start in the winter instead of the fall.
Yeah. So I'll just answer this concisely, that saying, you know, if you defer and start your grad studies in winter 2021 instead of in the fall, basically then that's fine. We take your guaranteed funding period just shifts to start from January instead of September. So you still have the normal funding. You'll still have the RA and TA duties as normal. You still have eligibility for awards. The one thing is that there may be some courses which are taught in the winter that have a prereq in the fall. And so you should talk to your supervisor about whether there will be any difficulties in terms of making the prerequisites line up. So that's the only thing I would worry about.
Okay, Patrick, I see another one about winter 2021 in the questions. Yes, so this is about just extending it, your master's to a 2.5-year degree if they're starting in winter 2021.
I'm a little bit confused by it, right? It says 2.5 years since I have 1 semester completely vacant. So normally students take their courses in the first year. If you start from winter 2021, it can drag out to 1.5 years if you're taking, because if you have something where you need the prereq, which is taught in the fall, and then you take the course in the winter, that may end up that you take courses into the 3rd term. So if they're asking, can you do your whole MSc degree in a longer period of time? Well, that depends on your talking with your supervisor. It may be possible in some cases, but you know, normally you're trying to do the research in the times when you would otherwise be doing classes early on, right? So then hopefully you can just rebalance the research and the teaching so that you end up finishing in 2 years anyway.
Thank you. Let's go to another question from the slides. Okay, so this is about switching to a PhD after doing 2 years of a master's instead of doing it in 1 year. Is this possible?
So they're talking about, I think, switching from the MSc into the PhD program, right?
Yes, I think that's
Yeah. So one should, it really should be talked about 1 year into, but it can actually happen a little bit later than 1 full year into the MSc program without causing huge problems. I would discourage people from waiting until the end of their 2nd year to ask about this, right? Talk about it earlier.
Yeah, and may I add something? In particular, if you are close to your 2nd year, your supervisor might think that you are already, prepared to write your thesis, right? And suddenly you are changing the plans a lot. So if you want to switch, I think that you should be sure that you have your committee meetings in your 1st year and you talk to your supervisor in your 1st year, okay?
all right. Thank you. Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there are any more in the slides, but there might be.
Correct.
Okay, so there are some other questions that are there in the Google Forms. We might be done from the side, so I might have to just read from the submissions to the Google Forms. So give me just a second, and I will pull up a question. So there's one question that says, what about the financial offer for the new international students unable to arrive in Canada by September due to COVID?
Yeah, that'll have to be altered if they're unable to arrive here, because then they aren't available in fall term. And so what we have as the plan then is if they can either just defer to January, and so then they're just kind of moving the whole thing back by 1 semester, or they can do this special thing of taking classes remotely. And I believe that, I don't want to say it's absolutely certain, but I think that many professors have said they're willing to pay the tuition to allow their students to start taking courses in that fall term remotely. So that's the kind, and that would be just in addition to the rest of their financial package. So that's the story we have.
So the idea that if during the fall you don't make money because we cannot pay you because you are abroad, you don't make money, but you don't lose money. We can pay you the tuition. That's the idea. But again, that's a conversation to have with the supervisor, right? To see if you rather prefer to postpone, arriving to Canada, or not making any money, and also not losing any money because we are going to try to cover the tuition.
One other possibility is it may be possible for some people to arrive partway through the fall term. And if that's the case, then we'll end up with some kind of complex thing that's in between the different possibilities, where you might be able to have a part of an RA for the part of the time you're here. And then, so that would be, that's more complicated. I don't want to go into great detail about it. But it could also work. If you're taking courses remotely and then you come here, you can still be taking those courses and that will work out fine.
All right, thank you. Patrick, I just copied over one of the questions into the slides Q&A from the form, so maybe we can pull that last question up. Yeah, so this says, if I start the fall session remotely, I won't be able to do TA work until the next winter. Will I be eligible for TA awards since I would have done only TA work only for 1 semester?
I'm not 100% sure on that, but I suspect you would still be eligible, but that's not immediately obvious.
Okay. I think we may have gone through all the questions. Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's all that I see.
Okay. Since we are almost coming out up on the time, what I will say is if anybody in the chat in this meeting wants to actually ask a question, feel free. You can unmute yourself and ask if you want. You can put it in the slides. Let's maybe give it 30 more seconds. See if there are any last questions. All right. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Oh, we do have a new question.
Okay. All right. Then let's get that up there. Okay. When there is an option between TA and RA work, who makes a decision between the two options? Presumably TA work is the default.
I can take that. I think that, well, I mean, the TA is 12 hours a week, right? So, you know, and you think that you are going to be, as a grad student, working, you know, on your research and on your TA, you know, 8, 9, 10 hours a day. Well, I mean, I don't know, 8, let's say. You know, multiply that by 5 or by 6, how many days you want to work a week, and then subtract the 12 hours. So I have heard this many times. I don't see a conflict between doing your TA duties and the research that you are going to be doing for yourself, right? You know, working with your supervisor. However, the problem that I have seen in my group, right, many times, is time management, right? I mean, so I think that if you are careful managing your time, there should be no conflict between, you know, one is more important than the other, right? They are both important, and the main difference is that the TA is limited, right? You have 12 hours per week, I think, where the RA is, you know, you are in a week that you are very enthusiastic, you might put a lot of hours on it. If the result, you know, so I don't see a conflict between the two. Great.
Yeah, I agree with what Mauricio said. Basically, what's happening here is that we as a department need to fund the grad students, and we need to get a certain amount of TA work done. And different supervisors have different amounts of grant funding, and some of them are able to pay RAs for up to all of their students, and others rely upon teaching assistants to be able to pay their grad students. And so this ends up being a discussion between initially the supervisors as they're trying to recruit grad students, whether they're expecting to have TA support for them, and myself and Kaylee and Mauricio and such, in the initial planning for bringing the students in, and then between the student and the professor later on as they see what the student needs in order to get things done. And so it's oftentimes a complicated dynamic. And it's important that we just remember that you know, both TA and RA work are very important. As Mauricio said, both of them offer rewards for the student in terms of learning about how to teach, as well as, of course, getting your research done.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I don't think we have any more questions, and we're almost perfectly on time. So maybe I will, if you want to say anything in closing, I'll let you do that now.
I just want to say that, you know, these are really difficult times, and you know, for the grad students who are working in isolation because they might have their family away, or, you know, and, you know, well, under exceptional circumstances, you know, it's possible to apply to come to work in CSS. But also remember that you should have a conversation with supervisor, and, you know, you should have Zoom meetings with your supervisor. You know, I'm planning next month to not go out with all my students, but maybe with one at a time have a coffee, you know, with certain distancing. I don't think that this is something bad, you know, not with the 10 of them, but one at a time. And so, and if you feel that your supervisor is too disengaged, because, you know, it's difficult right now, right? In the past, you used to cross your supervisor in the corridor and ask a question, and now you have to turn on Zoom, right? So by all means, contact me or contact Craig, and we can have a very friendly conversation, right? Because things has changed, and what we don't want is students to feel that they are, you know, left isolated, right? And it's very difficult sometimes to progress also. When you're isolated. So you find any kind of issue with the progress in your research, or, you know, your whatever, any issue, you know, just feel free to contact Craig or myself, right? I mean,
Absolutely, I agree completely.
Okay, excellent. With that, I think we can let you go. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining us.
you.
Yeah,
All right.
great session. Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And Patrick, I think I'm going to let you take over. I think you're muted.
Sounds good. So we'll just take a quick 2-minute bio break. So if you need to get up, stretch,